Hi, I'm Jennifer Fairbanks, and I'm the owner of Porcelynne and the designer of all of our patterns. And today we're actually going to be doing a sew along for the Rachel brief. Now this is a revamped pattern, so I released this pattern probably about 3 or 4 years ago, but I worked with my testers over the summer. So I tweaked the fit a little bit and I revised the instructions, so you should actually be able to get a really good fit. If you've already purchased this or any of the patterns that I redo, you can always just log into your account and re-download them, and they're available for you at any time. So another thing I added is I added 3 new views. So view A is what the original design was. So it's asymmetrical, so it's on one side. The inset's on one side. But I also made a few other options to make the pattern a little bit more versatile. So let's take a look at the finished garment so we can see what it looks like down here. And so this is the Rachel brief that I'm going to be demonstrating very shortly. The fabric that I used for the sample is actually in one of my kits. So this one I just released, so it's extra special. It has this really beautiful pink lace. And you can also make a matching bra, because there's also a matching bra kit that is also white with this pink color. So the Rachel brief now has 4 different view options. This is the original view that I actually created for this design, which is view A, and it's an asymmetrical design. I opted to actually add a few extra options just to make it a little bit more versatile, because I know a lot of people do not like asymmetrical. I love asymmetrical. So this panty that I'm actually going to sew is going to be view A, but there are different options. The side seam wraps around on all of them, so it comes towards the front. On D, it actually wraps all the way up to this point, so there's actually no side seam over here. The one file actually has several of the different patterns in it. This is the inset, so this is used on A and C. So on C, you would cut it mirrored. This one's view A, and this is the back. And I actually did not print out all of the other views because as you can see, my printer is running out of ink, so I actually have to conserve a little bit what I'm cutting right now. I did add a couple notches here so you can kind of figure out what lines up to what. It's really easy to actually cut the wrong piece for the back. So what I've done is actually on the really big back that's actually used for view D, it also has a notch right at this point, right over here. So you know that only the patterns with the notches are going to be the ones that go together. So I'm going to set this aside. Now I made this pattern so the crotch length really can be customized to your own measurements. So the instructions explain how to do it. You'd basically take in from any point on your body at your center front and in your center back. You're going to measure the full length, so go from center front between the legs to center back, and at that exact same point you're also going to sit down and then measure the straight point from that point on your body down to the table. And with the crotch length and the crotch depth, so the depth is the one sitting, crotch length is the one standing, you're actually going to plug your numbers into that chart and see where you fall. And depending on the length of your body, and it will actually recommend different size crotch pieces. This one I'm doing the straight extra large, so I have the self and I have the lining. For the inset, I don't know if you can kind of see, I have it pinned. I actually did both this fabric and a lace piece, so right now they're just pinned together because I wanted to have a nice little detail. I wanted to make sure it was a little bit more stable, which is why I put the fabric behind it. So this is my new microfiber spandex. So this stuff is really, really amazing. It has really great recovery. It looks on the thin side, but as I said, it's really luxurious once you actually have it on. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of talk and work on pinning these pieces together. We're going to have this is going to have several different steps that we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and just sew the panels together on the front. I'm going to wait to sew the back to the front until I've actually sewn the crotch piece. That way I can clean finish the top and the bottom. So I'm pinning this. This fabric is actually part of it's a brand new kit that I've just added, and actually I even have a matching bra making kit for this. So you can always make a nice little white with this pink and beige lace. It's really pretty. And just a couple more pins here. As I'm moving things around, I don't want to lose the pins. And I can go ahead and do this piece on the crotch. So with the right sides together, I'm going to line this up. I always pin at the ends and then pin in the middle. Then I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to take the crotch piece and I'm going to pin this one here. So I'm going to actually sew all 3 layers at one time. So I've got all 3 pieces in here. I'm going to get that piece right here. And because I don't like to keep going back and forth to the sewing machine and then to the table, and I'm actually going to do a little bit more pinning. I'm going to also pin the back. So I'm going to get this over here. So I'm looking at my front. So flipping this piece back over. I want to now put the right side together. So trying to figure this out. I'm not wearing my glasses, so I'm pretty sure this is the right side is facing down. I'm going to line up this piece down here. You should see that all the angles, everything should line up as close as it can at least. I cut with scissors, not with the rotary blade, so mine are not always 100%. Okay, so we have that here. I'm going to fold that here, and then we can actually take this other piece, wrapping it around, so I can get this back seam completely finished as well. Okay. And I'm just going to throw a couple extra pins in here, and then I will show you pretty much what this should look like at this point. So we have the crotch piece on this, and then we also, you see it's all completed there. So this is kind of what we call it's a type of burrito roll where everything's kind of shoved inside. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew this, and this seam over here with my overlock machine. And then once I have that, I'm going to bring it over here and I'm going to flip it right side out so you can see that. I don't have a camera at my overlock machine presently, so I'm actually going to do this step away from the camera. But when we come back, and once I finish up doing all the seams, I'll do the elastic at the zigzag sewing machine that I actually have a camera for. Okay, so we've got this. I haven't pulled it right side out yet, so I wanted to just kind of show you what we do. We then take and just kind of pull this so it's right side out. So we have a clean finish on this side and a clean finish on this side. So I also wasn't clear that the seam allowance on this is 3/8 of an inch everywhere. So when I actually go in and do my overlock stitch, since the overlock stitch is only 1/4 of an inch, I actually take and shave off a little bit, so the finished stitch line is going to be at 3/8. So I'm just going to pin my side seams together now. Now there are other ways you can do the construction. You could actually take and sew the elastic on the front and the back and the legs with its side seams open, and then close up the side seams once you've sewn the elastic. But I find that it's easier to kind of make mistakes when you do it that way. There are certain advantages to it. The way I'm going to do it, it's actually, I think you can correct and fix things once you've actually sewn the elastic on. So in case your seams don't perfectly line up on the sides, you can kind of play around with that. Okay. And you're like, this is a huge pair of panties. Yes, they are. I have a big bottom. Okay, so I'm just getting the rest of this ready. Yeah, this microfiber stuff is a little bit fun to work with. I said it's really soft. I was delayed getting here, but I finally got it. Okay, so I'm going to be sewing the seams. So you can see where they do actually wrap around a little bit. So I'll be sewing the seams, and then we'll meet over at the zigzag sewing machine so we can do the elastics. So I've gone ahead and I've sewn all of my seams together with my overlock machine. And yes, I use gray because that's what's loaded into that machine. This stitching I'll be doing in pink because that is what is on this machine. I'm going to be using this 3/8 inch elastic. And that is really just because this is what I have here at the house. It's not my first choice. My first choice is actually my lingerie elastic that's right here. It has a beautiful stretch and recovery, and I love working with this, and whenever I use this I know I do not have to stretch it at all. This elastic's a little bit funnier looking. This is actually one of those non-roll elastics, and it kind of looks like it's bubbled, but I have tested it and it shouldn't stretch out, and I know the fabric won't stretch out. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to sew this without really, I'm actually not going to make it smaller at all. On the panties, the amount that we reduced for the stretch is a lot more than we did on the tank, because these are something that actually is form-fitting to the body that needs to stay up on the body. So I flipped it right side out, but I'm actually going to sew on the wrong side. I like making sure that whatever I'm working on is up top so I don't accidentally sew it to something underneath my machine. So I'm going to start this around where the seam is, so it's a little bit less noticeable. I'm going to do this on the back. So I'm going to line this up right on the edge, and so the way I'm stitching this is I'm going to stitch and fold. So you can certainly use a picot elastic or really anything else. Actually, let me get that on the back right here. So I'm not starting it at the seam, starting about an inch away. You can use the measurements that are in the chart, but when you're working with the microfiber, I probably would just attach it like this without actually having to measure. If you cannot do that, I would probably just say add about an inch on it, and then try it out. Maybe just do one pass of the with the zigzag before you flip it and try it on to make sure that it's not going to be too tight for you or too loose. So I'm going to go ahead and I've got my zigzag all set up here, and I'm just going to start attaching. And you can always run a sample, do a sample stitch on some fabric. I've already tested this one. I know I tested this on when I did the Rachel on the top. The tank top used a much stretchier fabric. Well, it used a fabric that was about the same amount of stretch, but it had less recovery. So for this, I'm just going straight around. With a lot of elastics and a lot of fabrics, you can pull it a little bit. This one, I know from testing that we didn't want to stretch it. And so I'm sewing it on the inside so that way I can kind of fold it over on itself so it won't actually touch the skin, since it's not super soft anyways. Okay, and then I'm going to let it overlap by about an inch. Okay. Go ahead and get my stitches clipped. And then what I'm going to take is I'm going to take and fold it to the inside and then do my second row of stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and do this on the waistband. And so it's just a nice little pink stitching I have on this white. I got a cat here. Something on there. And I stitch over about where I started by about 1/2 inch, so I don't have to do any back stitches. Just reinforces it by stitching over it. Okay, so I got my waistband done. Now before I start sewing the elastic onto the legs, I actually want to just run a basting stitch to hold the crotch pieces together. It'll make it a lot easier. We won't have to like fight with it. So I'm just going to go back to a straight and take my stitch to the largest stitch possible. And then I'm just going to run a basting right along the edge to keep the 2 layers together. Because they can move around once you're kind of messing with it with the elastics, and you really don't want to deal with that. Plus you can then trim up the corners. And then if you didn't sew something straight, like if you have things that aren't lining up, like over right here, oops, and am I sewing something up? So I've got the crotch seams basted together, and then I'm just going to continue with my elastic. You know, I know it looks a little bit stretched out up here, but I'm not going to be too worried about it. I know that the elastic itself will shrink a little bit when it's washed. So for this one, for the next leg, I'm going to do, and I will speed up this portion of the video for you, but I will start it back here around the side seam on the leg. here is the completed Rachel brief, and this is the extra large. Still have a couple little threads to clip. But I ran out of elastic actually I had about 1 inch left over, so I was lucky that I had enough for this project. So there we go.